Okay, here's a quick overview of what we call a pair plot, which is actually a grid of a number of different plots. We call so within the SNS library, we can call pair plot, specify the data, and then the category, and this for iris data, it's a species. And we specify the size, and this is a smaller size, and this is the size of each graph. And in fact, now what was the size plot is actually should be the height parameter, but this is the height or size of each of the subplots here. And if you remember, the iris data consists of 4 different attributes. So we have the sepal length, width, petal length, and width, and then the species. And so it's going to plot these 4 different values here for us. So basically what it does is create a whole bunch of scatter plots, and there's a separate video introducing scatter plots. So a whole bunch of scatter plots here. So this is the scatter plot, this corner of the sepal length versus the petal width. And in this plot appears the sepal length versus the petal length. This one over here is the sepal width versus the petal width. Now these are matched. In fact, these two are mirrors of each other, flipped mirrors of each other. So they look a little different, but they're reflected in the XY axis and then mirrored. But this and this are the same plot. So you often see this with a different thing or else not, this top grid not shown here. Now, along the diagonal here, this would be plotting the sepal length against the sepal length, and that doesn't make sense. And so instead, along the diagonal, they have this, and that's a kernel density plot. And there's again another video talking about kernel density plots here. So these are the kernel density plots here of each of the attributes for this. Now, when we do this for the cancer data, that has a lot of attributes, and so we get a huge grid. And in fact, this takes a long time even to create. But we can obviously see some direct correlations between some of these values. But this is a huge, and it's so small, it's really almost impossible to see here. While you can do that, it's often better to select certain attributes. So here we're creating an attribute variable from our cancer and we're data set, and we're selecting just 4 of the attributes and the diagnosis, and then we're plotting. We're then using that as our plot. So we're just selecting certain columns from that and plotting only those. And now we'll get a smaller, more meaningful grid of just a couple of these. And then here I've actually said corner equals true, and so that will not plot these reflected versions of this. Now you can actually change this, and you can set what you want along the diagonal, what you want in the lower corner, what you want in the upper corner. There are different options, but by default this is a nice default settings for this. And so it shows all the different combinations of scatter plots and all the attribute kernel density plots also. So that's a quick overview of these paired plots.